If you've been thinking about wanting to start a podcast but not sure where to get started, I have some news for you. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast as well with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hi gang, Donna here. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Paul Glover. Paul describes himself as a recovering trial lawyer, an ex-felon, an unabashed Starbucks addict, a Chicago Bears fanatic, the author of Workquake, and the speaker on business and leadership topics, and is also a member of the Forbes Coaching Council. Today I'm going to talk to Paul about his Better Two moment, of how he blew up his law career and some other things, and ended up in jail for 5 years. Hello, Paul. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. How about yourself?
Doing fine. We had summer and now we're back to winter, so it's all good.
Same thing here. We're close enough to where the climate's about the same. And yes, we don't expect to have a long spring, so 2 days was about right.
Exactly. So let's go. So you were a lawyer. What kind of lawyer were you?
I was a labor employment lawyer. I actually, and also in that capacity, I was also a vice president of a Teamster local.
Okay.
So that was my career up until 1995.
So about 26 years ago.
Yes.
All right. So I mean, I've worked with lawyers. I was in the insurance industry, so I kind of get, the whole legal aspect. Not that kind, but so what exactly happened?
Well, as I tell everybody, I believed I was the smartest guy in the room.
Oh.
And I associated with bad people because I was a bad guy wannabe.
Okay.
I enjoyed that taste of, I guess, adrenaline rush that comes with hanging out with people who do bad things. And the problem is, of course, associations usually can lead you to a downfall. And over a period of time, I engaged in illegal behavior, not just bad behavior. And in 1995, a federal grand jury issued a complaint with 33 counts that charged me with a variety of white-collar crimes, leading to that included bribery and kickbacks and threatening government witnesses.
Wow. Okay.
I went through 2 trials, and the first trial was a deadlock, a hung jury. And then the second trial ended and I received a 7-year sentence, took my case to the Supreme Court and had a reduction in that sentence from prison. Obviously, I went to prison and fought my case there all the way to the Supreme Court and got a sentence reduction, but not an innocent guy, absolutely was guilty. And I was one of those guys that because I practiced law in federal court, when I stepped in front of the sentencing judge, in front of a packed courtroom, he said, "Mr. Glover, you are one of the few defendants that I wish I could give more time to under the sentencing guidelines."
Wow.
Yeah. So one of the you don't want to, lawyers who violate their fiduciary obligations and the trust deserve to be punished, and I certainly did that. I was a fiduciary on a health and welfare and pension fund for the union. And even though I never took money from those funds, I took kickbacks from those vendors who provided service to the funds. And obviously, not a good thing to do, an illegal thing to do, and an immoral thing to do. And I had a partner who was a bigger crook than I was. And interesting enough, though, and sad enough, is that he cooperated with the federal government to bring charges against me and testified against me in court both times. And of course, what he said was the classic, I was the dumb guy that did what Paul told me to do because he was the smart guy.
Wow.
And he got 1.5 years, and I got 7. So I can tell people that. And by the way, I'm an executive coach at this point in my career, and the experience of first having that level of arrogance is very similar to a lot of CEOs and presidents. That we start to convince ourselves that we are so good that the rules don't apply to us, that the laws don't apply to us, and therefore our behavior becomes more and more toxic. And we also believe we are the smartest person in the room, and that amount of hubris does not serve us well, nor does it serve the people that depend upon us, either as employees or customers or vendors, well. And so in my coaching program, I bill myself as the no BS workplace performance coach, because first, I don't take any bullshit because I used to ladle it out so I can identify it. I've got a great antenna for that. And my job is, if I'm hired, is to tell the person who hires me the truth. And a part of that truth is to identify the blind spots that are causing a leader to engage in toxic and destructive behavior. And once you've identified it, if you accept that identity, you accept the truth, then we can work on changing that behavior. And let me tell you that half of the time, people that I work with, we don't go far, because there are people who are made aware but don't care, and they're not going to change. The hardest person to coach is someone who's successful.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and one of the questions is, well, how did you become successful? And by tracing that trajectory, you can start to understand where their strengths and weaknesses lie and where their blind spots are. And we all have blind spots. That's why they're called that. And we don't see them. We don't identify them until somebody points them out. And it has to be someone we trust or someone who has had a similar experience. I'm the guy that had the similar experience. And I'm able to point out that experience and what the consequences will probably be. Hopefully not going to prison, but obviously destroying your own reputation or destroying the organization that you work with or damaging relationships. So it kind of it makes me the ideal coach for those who can tolerate me. I had a client that I asked to do a reference for me, and he said, absolutely. And I said, well, because I know you, tell me what the reference is going to say. And he said, Paul is an acquired taste, like cyanide.
I'm sure that's a good reference.
That's what I told him. And he said, you absolutely are a bitter taste to swallow, but you are definitely good at telling people the truth.
Well, and that's the thing. The truth in a lot of cases is a bitter pill to swallow, because a lot of people don't want to hear it.
No, they don't. And I actually have a presentation that I do saying how to avoid self-inflicted injuries, because we all bear a certain amount of responsibility for our situation, whether we like it or not. And when I was convicted and before I was sentenced, I had an opportunity to do what they call an acceptance of responsibility. And that is basically saying I did what I was charged and found guilty of. And if you do that in open court, you can get a reduction in your sentence.
Okay.
I refused.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Now that is the amount of humor. By the way, I've already been convicted. I know I'm dude. Sentenced, and I still would not accept responsibility.
Wow.
Yes. It took me 2 years in prison to come to grips with that, because we so want to blame other people for the bad things that happen to us.
Oh, it's much easier.
They clearly, if you're talking to me about it, you got cancer, doesn't apply. But if we're talking in the business world about where you got to where you are and you don't like it or it's a bad place, we need to look at your contribution to that happening.
Yeah.
And once you've got that acceptance of responsibility, then you're in a position to change. Until you do that, you cannot enact meaningful change.
But I can dumb this down to an insurance claim. My very first insurance claim as an adjuster, it was a parking lot accident. And it had been snowing in Minnesota, and I was working claims in several different states. So it was a parking lot accident in Minnesota. And I had been trained and I had been told before I took the floor, you're only going to handle single car accidents. Okay, it's like deer hits, things like that. Okay, fine. So first claim comes across my desk. It's a parking lot accident. I walk over to my boss. I've had 3 days of training, by the way, which is unheard of. And I go, so why am I getting this? Oh, because they liked your liability decision. So, okay, fine. So I call the insured and I'm like, so what happened? And I'm taking a recorded statement. He's like, well, I looked to my left and I looked to my right and I backed up. Okay, but the accident's not my fault. How is it not your fault? Well, it's not my fault. Did you clean the snow off your window? No. He should have seen me. It's not my fault.
There we go.
Actually, sir, it is your fault. Well, I want to speak to your supervisor. It was in that moment that I realized, and being in that industry, you realize that people don't want to take responsibility for their actions. I had an electric heating pad somebody put in a microwave oven, and it caught their kitchen on fire, and they wanted to sue the manufacturer of the heating pad in the microwave. Who puts that in their microwave? That's why we have those stupid instructions. My new curling iron says, do not use on eyelashes.
That's right.
Or your eyes. And you're like, who is that? Who is that person?
You're right. But by the way, liquid in this cup is hot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what you ordered, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. But
it depends on how hot it is. I mean,
what does?
Sometimes things are superheated, so I will give the lady the benefit of the doubt. But there are some claims that you look at and you go, this is insane. But that job made me realize that most people do not want to take responsibility for their actions. They wish to be the victim.
That's correct. Well, by the way, that's easier to be the victim,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously we don't want to accept the fact that we are responsible. You're that again, acceptance of responsibility, but it is the first thing you have to do before you can implement change in yourself and your behavior.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't do that, then you can't get there. It's impossible. And obviously, as a coach, that's the most difficult hurdle to overcome, especially with successful people.
Yeah.
They continually look at some other reason for the issue that has probably put them in the coaching process with me. Often I am engaged by a CEO to deal with a president or vice president who is extremely successful at generating revenue, but either kills or runs off the team. So they have become the diva.
Yeah.
And divas don't believe that they should ever be held accountable, and pointing that out to them only occurs when the CEO says the collateral damage that is attached to your performance has become so great that either you are going to change or I'm going to fire you.
Yeah, and the thing is, a lot of people in power don't understand the underling's job. I started out in mail file, so the ground base of insurance. So mail file clerk and claim setup. And I worked my way up to claim supervisor. And my husband at the time, he was like, well, you can have the corner office if you want it. The problem is I didn't want the corner office. Even my boss handed me the book. Now, I know some women feel this book is empowering. I didn't read it. But my boss looks at me in my review and he's like, I don't know whether to give this to you or not. And I'm thinking to myself, if you have a problem thinking whether to give this to me or not, maybe it's a bad idea. But I didn't say, I'm like, no, go ahead. So he gave me the book, Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. And I'm just like, I don't want the corner office. I never wanted the corner office. I was happy where I was. I didn't need the politics at a higher level because that's what it really boiled down to. And my husband's just like, well, why don't you want it? I'm like, because I like having, I have enough stress now. I don't need that.
You're right. Often the position is a pain in the ass,
Hmm.
and people take it. It's amazing to me. I just went through a coaching process with a woman that took a CFO position, and for the last three times through the last three coaching sessions, she cried. And we had the discussion about this job is obviously taking an emotional toll on you that was unexpected. She's absolutely competent, but the relationships and the politics were such that she just wasn't able to handle it well. She wasn't processing it well. And yet she couldn't quit.
Oh,
And we often have to be given permission to quit a toxic situation.
that was me. I was at a point at that job where I was sitting at my desk on the worst days going, I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit. And I was near, after I left the job, I was actually diagnosed with PTSD.
I believe it. Some jobs are that toxic.
And it was just because they kept piling and piling and piling. And it's like you can't get everything done. And you're supposed to be helping other team members because you're the supervisor. And that's fine and dandy. And I could do my job. But when you start giving me extra tasks on top of that, it just gets to be overwhelming. So when I left, it was, my husband was telling me, he's like, by the time you pick me up from the train at 5 to 5:30, until we go to bed, you are talking about this place. And that's toxic. I mean, that
It
takes a
is.
physical toll, and you don't even realize the toll it takes on your body physically because you're just
Absolutely.
going through and doing it.
And so I'm a big one about once I start to realize that you are misplaced, again, I believe I have certain obligations as a coach that other coaches disagree with me about. If I believe that you are misplaced in your position, I believe it's my obligation to tell you. And people often are shocked by the fact that I say, this is my opinion based on obviously the information you're giving me. I mean, I don't have any independent source here. In a coaching relationship, you're telling me what you want me to hear. And at the end of that, though, I need to take that information and have an opinion. It's amazing to me how many coaches say, well, you shouldn't have an opinion. I'm like, well, because you're supposed to allow the person in the coaching program to come to their own conclusion without undue influence. My argument is if you think I'm going to stand on the edge of the pool and watch somebody go down for the third time and not save them,
Yeah.
I could not, I just can't envision that. So at some point, when I recognize that you're misplaced, it's my obligation to point it out to you and to tell you why. And also, though, to say, let's talk about the toll this job is taking on you because it's apparent to me what it is. The woman that I just spoke about at our last conversation, I said, you need to take some time and you need to assess whether or not holding this position, it has a great title, it pays you a lot of money, is worth your health. She then quit, but she had to be given permission to even entertain the thought.
I just had a podcast I did Wednesday. That my guest was a professor who he ended up quitting his job because he ended up with diabetic ketoacidosis in the hospital
Mm.
because the stress had gotten to him so bad. So now he's made it his mission. And we got into a discussion about, back to my job. I came back early from pneumonia and I had an employee come to me and tell me no job is worth your health. And we don't think about that because we think of all the things we need. And for the gentleman I interviewed the other day, it was all about stress. All the stress just kept piling on, piling on, piling on. And we don't think about that. And reason I bring this up is because sometimes we need that outside voice. It can't be a loved one. It can't be a friend. It can't be a family member. It has to be that outside voice. So you giving your opinion of this to this person is actually something that they can see clearer because you are an outside voice. You're not their friend. You're not their spouse. Because my spouse could tell me the same thing over and over again. But if I don't, it may be resonating, but hearing it from outside source, it's a validation. It's like, okay, well, somebody else sees it too.
Well, and you're absolutely correct. And one of my mantras is I care, but not that much. Because I
Nice.
found that if I care too much, I can't give you that objective opinion. So yes, I do care. I don't know how you enter into a coaching relationship and not care, but
Right.
I've figured out that I can only care so much. Otherwise, my filter is skewed, and I need to see objectively. And not only that, but people will give you clues, but you got to be looking for them
Right.
because they're no one just comes right out and says I'm having difficulty. They make you discover the difficulty, but their behavior in the coaching process, after you've established a certain level of trust, it makes it apparent, and then you're able to say, well, let me point out something that I'd like for you to tell me about. And based on that conversation, we're starting to understand whether or not this is the right job for you. Because for me I'm a performance coach, but for me to try to make someone who is misplaced a better performer
It's not gonna work.
kills them. It really does, because they keep trying to do it, but it's just not going to. They're not going to function in that position doing that.
Well, then there's two things there. You have the person not following their passion, therefore it's a life suck. Sorry to put it that way, but that it's
Oh,
sucking the
it
life
is.
out of them. And secondly, for them to actually admit that they can't succeed, that's showing vulnerability. And we are taught not to be vulnerable because people can take advantage of that. So
Absolutely.
therefore, they're not going to want to say, oh yeah, you might be. No, they're not going to do that. They're going to be like, I got this. All that bravado is there. Let's circle back though.
Sure.
So when you went to prison, were you married? What, I mean, did it tear up your life completely?
No, my wife and I were married at that point. Gosh, let's see. I'm not going to number the number of years. We've now been married 39 years,
Okay.
and she waited. I tell people my wife had a backbone of iron, and we had that strong relationship. Had two sons, and she in our we had a conversation because my wife had no idea what I was doing.
Oh,
She
well,
knew she knew my job. She
mhm.
didn't know my side hustle.
Understand.
So, so she was caught completely by surprise. The first trial took 6 weeks. She was in court every day, and at the end of the 6 weeks, she looked at me and she said, "You're guilty." And well, and by the way, this is someone who is emotionally attached, but is hearing the evidence, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And at some point, the evidence is so overwhelming, and even then, I said nope, and we had a hung jury. And I said, "See, not guilty." She said, "That's not being not guilty. That's just one person decided not to vote that way." So think about this. I sucked every penny of my two boys' college funds. We took a
Wow.
second mortgage out on the house to pay the attorney's fees for two trials. And at
Wow.
the end of that, I went to prison. By the way, I went to 7 years was a lot less than I could have been because anyway.
Yeah.
So she stayed. And my conversation with her before I left was anytime you feel the need to divorce, don't hesitate. You've
Amazing.
got absolutely no reason not to, but if you choose to stay, I'm fine with that, obviously. I love you, but if you need to go, go. Well, she didn't. And I got out and we're still together. I got out in 2001. So we're still together and a strong relationship. My boys obviously have now moved out and have their own families. Uh, Obviously, you want to test for the relationship.
That's it.
Yeah, that's right. And so, and I don't. Again, I tell people I don't recommend that you put yourself in that situation, but you also have to understand that often we have that you have many situations that are like that, and
Yeah.
you have to recognize the stress and strain you put on those people around you by your behavior.
Well, and I think that's the thing. A lot of times when a situation or a relationship gets stressful, we just say 369, I resign, I'm done.
Yes.
And you know, I came, I'm a child of divorce. And at the time in the 70s, it wasn't as prevalent as it is now. But so it was kind of like, oh, your parents got divorced. and now it's like, yeah, okay, whatever. But I mean, back then it was harder to do it. And I guess you had to appreciate the relationship a little bit more before you walked away. And now it's just like,
Well, and I have to, obviously, since you mentioned your childhood divorce, so am I.
okay.
My parents, my mother was married 8 times and my father was married 7.
Wow.
They married each other twice.
Oh,
And
didn't
the
learn
last,
didn't learn the first time, huh?
the last divorce my mother got, and they're both dead now. The last divorce she got, the judge said, the only way I'm giving you this divorce is that you have to have the court's permission to remarry.
Wow.
So yeah, I had the stability of my relationship with my wife is
Amazing.
from my perspective, a freak of nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, my experience being a child of multiple divorces is that you don't ever trust relationships.
I would say she was giving your mom or Liz Taylor a run for her money there, you know?
Yeah,
Wow.
without the
Yeah.
money. So
Yeah.
yeah. So
Wow.
yeah, and by the way, we all have to accept that our upbringing molds us to a certain degree. The issue is overcoming the deficiencies that those relationships force on us. And we
And
often want to blame that, right? I mean, it's very easy for me to say, I'm as screwed up as I am because of my mom and dad. Well, that may have some credence at some point, but either you take control of your life or you live as a victim. And I am not a good victim. you know.
no, and here's the thing, and you also have to be aware of the patterns that you're in your family history. And once you
Absolutely.
can look at those patterns, you can start making changes. Family, I often get told, well, I can't believe you went through a lot of stuff that I went through. And it's like, firstly, I survived it. It made me stronger. And secondly, it makes me a hell of a writer, to toot my
There
own
you go.
horn. It gave me life experience to write about, to be able to bring into a character's life. So, you know, do I wish it was different? Sure, it would have been nice to have that little quintessential white picket fencing, all that stuff. But I didn't, and it's okay because it's made me who I am. And I might not be sitting here talking to you had I had that quintessential white picket fence life.
Well, and Frank Sinatra had a quote. He said, "Don't hide your scars. You've earned them." And I look at that and I go, first, you're absolutely correct. We're sitting there talking to each other because of our life experiences and what we've overcome or not. But regardless, they've provided us the opportunity to do what we do.
Hmm.
And that's what makes me what I think is an exemplary executive coach. And I absolutely believe that experience gives me the opportunity to help others who are blind to a variety of things. And you mentioned something very interesting: patterns.
Yeah.
It's interesting how we never recognize the pattern that we're in. Because it's ours
Hmm.
and we're familiar with it and we're okay with it until somebody points it out and says, let's look at why you do what you do. That we suddenly, it's as if we wake up, right? We look at it differently.
We wake up or we bury our head in the
Well,
sand.
it's
It's
true.
all it's all depending on if you're ready for that change,
That's
then you
true.
wake up.
I,
Otherwise, you're doing what the woman. I had an insurance person. You'll appreciate this. I asked her. I said, "So how did you go to avoid the accident?" She's like, "Well, I did what when my son gets scared. I did what I do with him." And I'm like, "What is that?" I put my hands over my eyes and counted to three. So what did you do to avoid the accident? I put my hands over my, and it's like,
okay.
yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
you see the car coming at you, and the best way to avoid the accident is to put your hands over your eyes. So here's the truth coming at you. Somebody's calling you on your bullshit, and you're gonna put your hands over your eyes. And
Yeah.
oh, I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to change it. The
Well,
same thing.
and this is all, it's from my perspective, this is what I do and why I like it. But I also have when I say I don't care, I care just not enough. I also put my skin in the game.
Hmm.
My coaching fee is broken into two parts. The first part is what you pay me for being a retainer. I don't take retainers less than a year because I've found out that it takes that long. Whether you want it or not, it's going to take us that long. But we're going to create a plan of action. And I'm going to put 50% of my compensation in the bank. And at the end of that year, you get to decide if I get it based on whether or not we achieved the goals. Now, we get to set the goals and you're going to set them. But I also tell people that this now puts me, because of the skin in the game, into the process. And that means when we have our every other week conversation and you agreed to do something, but you didn't do it, our conversation has a certain edge to it because 50% of my compensation is based on reaching the goal. And if you're not doing what you agreed to do, you're influencing and impacting me.
Yeah.
That's when I put my 10.5 foot up your ass. So, and by the way, I always give people a choice. We can stop right now and you can pay me my full fee and not deal with me anymore. Or you can accept your responsibility to do what you said you're going to do and we can move on. It's amazing to me how many people quit, by the way.
Really?
Because it got hard.
Well, yeah.
And it will get hard. Change is not easy. I don't care what people say. They hate it, even though they can do everybody can do the words, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know what's good for me and I know what I have to do. And by God, I'm going to start tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, tell me, is today something you can't deal with? Well, yeah, but let's do it tomorrow. No, we're going to say, if you're going to start now.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well,
so yeah.
No, I mean, here's I was forced into make changes last year because my husband passed.
Well,
so that it was a long-term thing. So I mean, it wasn't that it wasn't expected. It's still a shock. But you're forced to make changes. So suddenly I am single for the first time in 17 years and I have to make a choice. Do you want to eat your grief? Or do you want to take care of your health? So I made that change. But there's so many women I know that, because I read cards and do things of that nature, so I counsel people somewhat. And there's so many women I know that, oh, my husband takes care of all the finances. My husband does this. And I'm thinking to myself, and this is before my husband died, because I was the one that was in charge of things. And I said to him, I'm like, well, what are you going to do if he gets hurt in a car accident? What are you going to do if something happens to him and he's incapacitated? And, oh, I don't know. Maybe don't know is not a good answer.
Well, that's a self-inflicted injury.
Yeah.
You are setting yourself up to be the victim and suffer.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, unacceptable behavior. By the way, I'm sure you know I am not the coach for a lot of people, but I can tell you that it's pretty effective if you're up for the task. And by the way, you mentioned something I wanted to come back around to: self-care.
Mm-hmm.
It's extraordinary to me how many leaders don't take care of themselves. And what you said about if you are a team leader and you're going through the team's going through difficult times, for instance, how about the last 12 months?
Yeah.
That level of stress, if you're doing your job, transfers from them to you.
Mm-hmm.
My contention is if you're not, you have an obligation to engage in self-care. Otherwise, you cannot function as a team leader effectively. And in this level of this time of high stress, where we continually talk about the well-being of the employee, we often forget about the well-being of the team leader. Because somehow they're supposed to be able to handle their own personal stress, plus have the transference of stress and be okay.
Right.
Doesn't work. And yet team leaders are extraordinarily difficult to get to engage in self-care. For instance, getting them to turn off their phone for the boundaries. It's all, to me, you've got to establish boundaries. Otherwise, self-care never gets a chance.
But that's the thing. People of your generation, my generation, we weren't taught to set boundaries. We were taught to perform. We were taught to please. We were taught to seek that approval. And so we push, push, push. And that's why you have some people that just, they don't do self-care, and they just, all the stress gets to them. And then you have the other people that self-medicate,
Yes. Oh,
which is
yeah.
a whole nother caveat of problems. So, there's we have to find a balance to be able to take care of ourselves, deal with the work stress, deal with our daily personal stress and our emotional well-being. I mean, now we're in a period where people are more willing to discuss and be open about their emotions. Their vulnerability can be seen. But for a long time now, I mean, you would go to work, it didn't matter if you know, I talked about this the other day because there was a point in my time in my office when everybody was out of the office at a different branch out of state. Hurricane Katrina was coming. I had family in New Orleans. My stepmother died when they were evacuating due to a blood clot. My grandmother was in a hospital for 4 days with no power. And I'm terrified because my mom's gone. This is my mom's mom, so I'm worried about her. And I'm running a whole office, plus interviewing, plus sitting in an actuary meeting, plus and so it's like, and when I go to a junior member who's under somebody else and said, "Can you take this interview for me?" She looks at me and says, "No." I was angry. I didn't have I didn't want to deal with getting into a pissing match with her. So I was just like, whatever. But that was me taking it on and just kept piling, piling. And that's what we were taught to do, because you need to man up. You need to own yourself. Even as a woman, you're told to man up.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
Mansplaining.
yeah,
We're going to tell you how to behave because
yeah,
obviously we've got it down pat.
yeah,
That's why we stroke out at age 55. And you're absolutely correct. The concept of self-care is still working its way into the mindset of the baby boomer generation. And you're correct. We self-medicate. We eat. By the way, when the pandemic first started, I immediately jumped on this thing about do not believe you get to reward yourself by food. Just because you made it through the day doesn't mean you can overeat, doesn't mean you can overdrink. That's not a reward system if you want to be an effective team leader. Because you've got to be able to go back in, and you are the example. Except that I hate people who occupy team leaders positions but don't believe they're the example. You are the example. Your team watches you and what you do. If you're on 24/7, they're on 24/7. Why? They're afraid not to be. If you don't take all your vacation, they don't take all their vacation. So guess what? You need to first take self-care, but then you need to make sure that the example you're setting through the self-care permeates your team.
right. When
Crazy.
when I first started that job, um, I wasn't with my husband, but when we got together, I had to pick him up from the train because he was legally blind, so he couldn't drive. So even though I was a salaried employee, I get there in the morning when I was supposed to. Only when I had pneumonia did I stay from 6 in the morning till 10 at night. Otherwise, I was there in the morning, and at 4 o'clock or 4:30, when it was my time to go, I had to go because I had to pick my husband up from the train. I set those boundaries for me because it's like
Yes.
the thing is about being a salary employee, and we don't look at this. That salary is great. You get benefits. It's great. But when they're pushing you to work longer and longer hours, you're not making as much money as you think you're making, because then you're putting it all out. You're putting it all back into the company. And you need to be a team player. Well, I am being a team player, but I also need some downtime. I don't need to be reviewing claim files or whatever. When I had pneumonia, and this was something else I was talking to the guy about, I had left because I was sick. I was out. I had my boss call me and tell me, "I need you to write this report up so we can fire this guy." The same guy, now mind you, the same guy that my boss had as her employee, when I went through his desk, he had mail that had been sitting on his desk for 2 years. When he was her
Wow.
employee, that wasn't in a file. But I found all this. And now she wants me to fire him. She wants me to write the letter. So I write the letter up with pneumonia. I send it to her. She fires him. 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, when the unemployment comes back that he's fighting it, I'm the one that gets to the meeting. I'm like, but
Oh,
once again, and the guy I was talking to the other day, so he's in the hospital and he was supposed to have a webinar, and his boss messages him and says, "Hey, you got this webinar today." He's like, "I'm in the hospital," and he's like, he's still trying to figure out how to make it work though, and
but
that's
well, okay, that's why people first toxic employers need to be punished.
yeah.
I can only tell you that, and you punish them by talent leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, talent often doesn't leave. It stays for a variety of reasons. It stays in a toxic work environment. And you're absolutely right. The mantra for especially salaried employees is do more with less.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's how we're going to squeeze another penny out of the dollar that you've been earned. And that's just unacceptable. And we need to recognize that. Hopefully we are beginning to, but it's an uphill struggle. And I see it in the coaching program with executives who are under so much pressure. And they respond, and you're absolutely correct. They respond by self-medicating and trying to push through, but then they take it out on their subordinates. And they pass that pressure along, and unacceptable. It just is. We're still struggling though, because you're right. The concept of the Puritan work ethic has been ingrained in us
Mm-hmm.
because capitalism saw that as an advantage.
Well, and when you're talking about people not wanting to leave the toxic work environment, it's the same situation of, well, I recognize where I'm at. I know what's here. I don't have to meet anybody. I know exactly what is expected of me. It goes back to the whole thing you were talking about with change. Why leave? Because when my grandmother was in a nursing home, she had a roommate that was stealing her diapers. There's a reason I'm saying this. It's because so we're in a family meeting and she's complaining to me on and on about this woman that she hates this woman. She really wish. So we're in this meeting and I said, so can my grandmother get a different room? My grandmother, no. Like, but you don't like this lady. You don't want to be there. No. So after the meeting, I'm like, why? She goes, because I know what she is. I know who she is.
In that old saying, the devil you know.
Yeah.
Yep. And I'm actually writing a paper right now for Forbes about how you give yourself permission to quit. And it is amazing how we have to juggle two aspects of this. First, we can usually see the rational part. It's that emotional part that we struggle with, and we can't overcome it to actually do what the rational information tells us to do. Your grandmother is a good example of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather complain about the situation rather than do something about it, because maybe anybody who gets ready to quit their job is always worried about, can I be employed? Obviously, my argument is the old one. Look for a job while you have a job,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that way you cover that. You start to say, how do I overcome the fear of quitting? Because it's a legitimate fear. Because if I don't, look at what's happening here. And yet we often struggle with it. We have to, and by the way, I'm a planner, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I've got the 5 steps you got to go through to be able to quit. And if you follow them, you can do this. If you don't, you will hang up someplace. And therefore you'll stay. Now, I do believe that the younger generation, the Zs in particular, have no problem quitting.
Oh no, they don't. They will tell you exactly what they need to say, when they need to say it, and that's it's in your face.
But
I
I
had
also believe that's because they've got a safety net, their
possible.
parents.
Yeah. I mean,
And
our parents, no.
oh my God, if you try to go back home and live in your parents' basement, they will lock you out.
Pay me rent. You're gonna buy your own groceries. You're gonna.
There we go. Exactly the case. And by the way, maybe nothing wrong with that, but clearly the mindset has changed. And thank God.
Yeah.
I believe that those who come into the workplace now and say, I want a work-life balance, it's not that we didn't want it. First, we didn't think we could have it. And second, we were afraid to ask for it.
Right. I remember quitting. I worked for a TPA, third party administrator, so someone that handled the claims. And I remember I had found another job, and I had it enough in my head that I could take a 2 week vacation and then get my 2 weeks notice and still have a week between me starting my next job. So I was going to have 3 weeks off. Beauty,
Ooh.
right? So I go to my boss and I give her my notice, and she looks at me and she goes, because the way I had set it up, actually, I was giving her 2 weeks, but I'm like, I had a week's vacation still. So she was only getting me for a week. And she's like, well, Dawn, if you do this, I'm gonna have to fire, I'm gonna have to blackball you. You can't come back to the company. I'm like, all right, so what? That's fine. So I worked my last week and I took my lump of salt, and then I headed down to New Orleans for vacation to see my family. And as I'm driving down, I get a call from my new boss. And my new boss says, hey, we have an emergency situation. Can you start tomorrow? I'm like, no, I am in New Orleans. I'm not going to be able to. Well, I actually will tell this because it is kind of a twisted story. So I ended up taking a week, went to New Orleans, came home, and I took an extra day. So I start the new job. And my boss was like, I'm really sorry you had to come in, but the guy who you're taking his place, he had a massive heart attack. He's in the hospital, and we need you to start now. And I'm glad you came in. I'm like, what are you talking about? Because you see, the insurance industry is very incestuous. And so I had found out from a coworker at my old job that the guy who allegedly had this heart attack had started over in my old job. And so I looked at my boss and said, really? He had a heart attack? He goes, yeah. I said, that's funny because he's at my job. What? Yeah. Can you leave me alone for a little bit? Sure. Well, he had told my job that the new job I was working for, well, he, how did he put it? Oh, that the job I now had was letting him try the new job out.
Jeez.
So what I guess my point is, don't sit there and lie about something because it'll come back at you.
I would hope so. And clearly, we're hoping that workplaces get better. But I'll tell you what, it is a slow grind. Right now, of course, the labor market now favors the employee.
Yeah.
And if you have the mindset of I'm not going to tolerate being disrespected or treated poorly, it serves you well now. It's unfortunate that that's the kind of leverage you have to be able to use to get a decent job and maintain a decent job. We are slow learners.
Well, the insurance industry used to be a very good industry to work in. You had job security, and then after 9/11, it kind of fell apart, and they started taking more advantage of people. My very first job I loved. When I first started working, we had this camaraderie. We had this team, the whole office. We did parties. Everything happened, and then they were going to move. They were going to move 40 miles to Aurora from Schaumburg, and people started quitting because they're like, I'm not making that commute. I'm not making that commute. Well, when that happened, you suddenly were getting 40 new claims a day. Now, 40 new claims a day doesn't sound like a lot, but you have to contact both the insured and the claimant in the accident, and you have to investigate it. You have 30 days. Plus, you have to handle all the pending that's already on your desk. So you're dealing with just constant stress. And I was like, okay, I'm getting out of here. So you find ways to get out when it really gets too bad, and it's scary. But like you said, as long as now they're paying more attention to the employee, that's where things are going to turn around again. Because there used to be a time where your employer, oh my gosh, here's a Christmas ham for you. Here's a Christmas turkey. You're going to get a bonus. You're going to get this. And then all that kind of just, they kind of was like, screw you.
Yeah. We don't need to do it.
Right.
We're not going to do it, even if it's the right thing to do.
Right.
I think that's always the contention, isn't it? What's the right thing to do? And unfortunately, the bottom line becomes the right thing. And where do we get that extra few pennies? Well, we get that from taking it away from the employees. So we have this concept of a different concept of capitalism that everybody hopes is coming into the marketplace. But then you see the investment bankers and how they treat their interns. And you go, this is this is the educated group, by the way. This isn't the blue collar group. This isn't the service industry. This is the financial industry, and this is how you treat people.
But if you go back to 1987, 88, Wall Street,
Yeah. Yes.
that's that statement that Gordon Gekko says in that movie, that greed is good, is still the most timely thing. And the fact is, I know when Oliver Stone made that movie, it wasn't supposed to be a template for how our economic system should go, but in a roundabout way, it turned into that.
It certainly did. Yes. And he is not, Gecko is not the exception,
No.
he's the rule.
Hmm.
And that's unfortunate. But
Yeah.
we'll see. Obviously, transitions and change come difficult and take time and a lot of pain. I don't care how you want it to go. It usually is. It's not linear. We're gonna stutter step around, but maybe we're headed in the right position. I continue to remain. Because I see that people can change when they want to, and that's the benefit that I get from the coaching process, is that you do get to see people. Not a majority, by the way. I wish it was a majority, but there's still a group that suddenly understand the need to and do what they need to do to change. And that's the feedback that you get. Whenever I'm talking to someone who's in that change process, it's invigorating, because I have 45 clients right now, and other coaches would say, well, you can't possibly deal with that. I can, only because of the transfer of energy is not one way.
See, and energy has a lot that I think that's another good thing that's happening, is we're seeing the metaphysics of everything.
Yes.
I talked to a neuroscientist a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about, we got into the conversation about intuition and how we're all connected. I mean, Star Wars explains it in layman's terms as the Force, but it's the truth. I mean, my husband and I, which I didn't even talk to him about, my husband and I were so connected that I would be like, man, my knee's hurting. He's like, yeah, my knee is hurting. I'm like, as soon as I recognize it, mine stopped. I'm like, great. So, I mean, you can be so connected to somebody, it's insane. But I think the transfer of energy, if you're feeling rewarded, then yeah, you can handle 45 clients. But if it's a big suck, it's not going to work for you. It's the same thing with the job. I want to touch on your book, Workquake. Tell me about it.
Well, Workquake is a compilation of articles that I've written, and I guess musings and thoughts. It also it includes two things. There is the business aspect about here's good business practices, but I also there were two blogs that I did extensively, and one of them was the daily mantra, and the daily mantra is my self-care portion of the book, because I believe that is so huge for leaders. So I've got the daily business aspect and then the daily self-care aspect as a part of the book. I'm getting ready to reissue or issue a second book in September. So it'll be a follow-up as Workquake 2, because I'm so original, that talks about, by the way, the subtitle of Workquake is Seismic Change. And I believe that we're still engaged in that transition period that is the workquake. And it is transforming the workplace as it should. And I believe that it's time for an update, because, I'm a strong believer in conscientious capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
And the commitment to that, I think, is huge. And so that the new book is going to be an add-on to the old book, which apparently I'll put together in a big book. so that's where it came from. It came from my daily experiences in the coaching process that included both business and self-care.
And that's a good thing, because people, like we talked about, people need to know about the self-care aspect, especially in corporate America, because we don't necessarily take into consideration. It would be awesome if, instead of the smoke break, which was always kind of an awkward thing, because the smokers get to go take a 10-minute break. But oh my gosh, if you don't smoke, guess what? You better sit your ass down at your desk. You better not go socialize. And sometimes you need to socialize just to vent.
Oh, absolutely.
Just to relax, to be human.
Well, And the deal with we've ignored well-being in the workplace. We tried to separate that and say whatever happens in your personal life is on you. And by the way, don't bring it to work.
Right.
Because I don't want to know you've got a problem that's impacting your performance. All I care about is your performance instead of the reason why it's not going well. Maybe we've made that transition to where we recognize that the two are intertwined. You cannot separate them. If you want a high performance work team, you have got to be engaged in their well-being in all facets of their life. And some of the pushback I get is, well, that's intrusive. No, it's not intrusive. It absolutely is about caring. And now you can have somebody that say, stay out of my life, and you should obviously go along with that. Once though you see the need is there, that's got to be a part of your job as a team leader. By the way, the team, I'm a wordsmith. I hate the term employee.
Okay.
I hate the term manager.
Okay.
There's no one I've ever met that wanted to be managed except the working dead. And the working dead want to be managed so they don't have to do any more than you actually see them do. So it's team leader, team member, but I also believe that team leaders have to be coaches.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where you start to have the impact, is when you're coaching. I also believe that self-directed teams are the future of work. And we need to get there.
Well, and I was going to say something going back to you're talking about if something's affecting somebody at their job. When you think about bereavement, okay, we give people 3 days bereavement. Okay, I'm almost at a year. I'm almost at a year, and there are days where I'm just fine, and there are days where I'm not. So to expect people to go and, especially if it's a spouse or a parent, oh, sorry, it's 3 days. You're supposed to be fine now. It's crazy. And
that's reality.
Yeah. I mean, same thing with, oh, you had a kid. Okay, 6 weeks is good enough for you to be adjusted.
Well, and by the way, anyway, there's so many issues we could talk about.
Oh, I know.
That need to be corrected, and that it is not up to the government to correct them. No. It's up to the employer to correct them. And if we don't recognize that, do not anticipate an engaged workforce. We utter those words as if they really matter. We want engagement. Let me see. You took away my pension plan, gave me a 401k.
Yeah.
You took away my insurance, but make me pay for the insurance I get. And you haven't given me a decent living wage in the last 20 years, but I'm supposed to be engaged.
Yeah.
No, that's why 60% of the workforce is not engaged. How about if we want engagement and what we get from that is discretionary effort? Yeah. If you want discretionary effort, which is the difference between low and high performance, then you have to do something that actually does engage me. Recognize that you will profit at the end, but you have to do these things for us to get to that point. We're still trying to figure that out. It's crazy to me. The science, the research is so clear about this that it takes someone who wants to be blind to it to ignore it. But we do.
Well, you said something, I had one job that I had a pension at, and everybody else. And in fact, that job, well, this is the last year we're doing the pension. Now we're moving over to a 401k. So you still have your pension, but now we're going to be, and basically, let's be honest, the 401k is Vegas. Let's go to Vegas because that's about what it is. And not only that, another thing you touched on is your insurance. Yes. Before the company helped pay for it, or you had a minimum amount, and your deductible, oh my gosh, your deductible was maybe $100, $500 tops. Now your deductible is insane, usually $2,000 to $3,000 in some cases. Who has that?
Nobody, no one. And we argue about minimum wage as if it makes sense. Mm-hmm. To say that someone in our environment, our society, can live on $7 an hour, family of four. It is insane that we have an argument about that, but we do.
When I first moved out, I think my first apartment was $350 a month. Which, I mean, granted, waitress wages were still what they are. It was 201 an hour, but the minimum wage was, I think, 450. But because I was in a white collar job, I was making a little bit more than that. So because I worked in the office instead of being,
Yeah,
but
manufacturing.
yeah, I mean, I worked at it. The worst job I ever had would be working the graveyard shift at a drinking straw factory. That lasted 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Because when you live in a house with a bunch of people that are up during the day, it doesn't work. It does not
No,
work. So,
no,
but that's a job now that now I don't even know that how many drinking straws do you need because now we don't do that.
no, we
So
don't.
once again, technology has changed in evolution. That's the one thing we have to look at a living wage and what happens when, Domino's is advertising now self-driving cars, self-driving pizza delivery. So as what happens as technology increases that we don't have the need for it, they're putting in a data hub over at the former Motorola building up here, a solar powered data hub, which is awesome. And they'll need some employees, I'm sure. But as we grow technology wise, it's not going to be someone else taking your job.
No, it isn't. And we keep thinking that there's a limit to that disruption. There isn't.
Mm-mm.
And so someone quoted said, if you can automate it, you can outsource it. And that's exactly the case. And when you think about the disruption that's going to take place when the autonomous driving vehicles are actually perfected, when it comes to truck drivers,
Yeah.
I look at that and I go, there will be 500,000 unemployed truck drivers in the next few years.
Mm-hmm.
Where are these people going? Because those are decent paying jobs, not
Yeah.
the best, but decent. Hard work, you earn the money, but it's there for you.
Yeah.
That's going to disappear, and we're not preparing for this.
I mean, simple. It can go. You can look at something simple as when I worked at McDonald's, which is back in 1983, 84. I worked one of those first drive-through when they had one drive-through window, when you had to make the drinks yourself, when you didn't have all these buttons to push. The fry basket, I had burns on my arms from the fry basket because you had to do it. And now that's all automated. It's all just, hit a button or not even hit a button now. The computer will send the drink cup down.
It does.
And people are like, oh, well, this is awesome. It is awesome, but there's caveats because what happens when there's a glitch in the system or there's a bug in the system, like the pipeline that was held for ransom. We have to look at there's always the possibility of a glitch. We can't just turn everything over to AI and say, hey.
Well, apparently we're still working on that glitch and how we're going to deal with the employee and the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And we're slow, like I said, we're slow learners, but maybe we eventually get there. I hope that obviously in my coaching program that the people who I coach recognize that behind every number on a spreadsheet, there's a face.
And that's important.
And you need to take care of that face.
Yeah.
Because that person generates that number. We somehow disconnect. We see the number, but we don't look at the effort and the person that generated it. And that's where it goes sideways. So we have to always be thinking about that connection. And if you want to increase that number, you treat that person better.
Yeah.
Definitely. Then they'll do what you want with discretionary effort to make that number bigger. It seems so simple, and yet we can't quite get the equation right.
In time, hopefully. So I'm gonna go back to, so you went to prison and now you have a new lease on life. And so I have to ask, we're gonna go to the better two moment. Was it better to have done all those bad things to end up with the life you have now?
Let me give you one of the debates in prison. I was doing 7 years, so I was going to do 5.5 years of prison. And one of the debates was if you had the option to go into a freezer, cryogenics, and be frozen asleep so that time that passed was as if it were a day. And after 7 years. They would wake you up and you would go home. Would you choose to do that? And my response was, not on your life. Would I recommend and would I wish that I had done things differently? Of course I do. I'm not an idiot. I don't want to go to prison. I don't want to be a bad guy. But for me to look back on it and say, do you regret things you did? Yes, I do. Would you do them again? Absolutely not. Do I cherish the experiences and the ability to turn those experiences into positive things? Yes, I do. Without the experiences, I'm not me. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, but I'm okay with me.
But see, that's the thing about the better two. That's why I always pose it, because the better two, you've learned something from it. Either you're totally accepting it was fine, it was great, or you, like yourself, you can look at it and go, it wasn't the best choice I made, but
Yep.
I learned something from it.
Absolutely. And I'm trying to pass that along. See, that's the pass along. Because at some point you say, I was gifted with all sorts of opportunities. I was a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And I should not have had to do what I did to be satisfied. But I also say that behind every white collar criminal is a lawyer.
I actually had a conversation with a lawyer once, and he's telling me, well, I think the law means this. And I'm like, shouldn't you know what the law means?
Well, because the white collar guy, he goes to his lawyer and he says, I have a friend, and this friend has this situation. And I want you to tell me what I can tell my friends so they don't go to jail. But they want to do this. Tell me how. That's that hypothetical that lawyers exist in. And we give them the information that keeps them out of jail. But we're still aiding and abetting because we know the deal.
Yeah.
We're just participating. So no, and I think that a part of my redemption is the ability to pass along my experience so someone else doesn't have to have it. Great. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Well, if anybody's interested in coaching from Paul, you can go to paulglovercoaching.com, and his book is available, Workquake, on Amazon. And this episode will be uploaded shortly, and it'll be on YouTube as well. We were going to do this live, but technical difficulties and things happen. So I thank you, Paul, for for joining me, and for my listeners tuning in. So thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Well, thank you. It's been a stimulating conversation, and I've gotten some energy. So thanks.